Welcome to the February 11th Jail and Zones production user call. We have Dan, Noor, Jan, Carlo, Daniel, Alexander, and myself, Michael. And the BSD CAN call for participation closes Wednesday. I encourage you to check that out. And possibly of interest to some of you, a white paper that I helped co-author from SNIA has published this week. It's dated the 27th, but this was many years in the making. And I participated in the previous version of it. It was an amazing team to work with. Give it a look. It's bringing in a lot more points like KPIs and a higher level of sort of oversight from, say, ISO standards and so all. I encourage you to take a peek. Noor, it sounds like you have a brief OCI update.
Yes, so on the specifications development level, we're at the final steps. So Doug and Samuel, the main owners, are reviewing it before actually the opening a pull request on the original specification group itself. So that's good. But on the outside the scope of the specification, we actually created a new GitHub organization. Copying it here.
Perfect. Yeah.
Basically, to organize all the development activities, whether it's code related, testing related, or documentation related, according to the actions that have been discussed with Doug and others, what to do next after the specs are finalized, basically. And that touches all the levels of the stack, from the very low runtime level, runtime managers, orchestration, networking, etc. So if anybody's interested, as just to follow up, or even better, if they want to take part in action, please join there and help.
And is the repo code or documentation or a little of each? Let's take a peek.
All of it. At the moment, the project management related activities are done here. Just
cool.
a second. Yeah. And the rest basically is code related repositories. So the Proj Cloud Tech is just to organize the works more for project management, and basically that should branch out to all the related code repositories, whether it's code or documentation as well. Yeah.
Cool. And what does CRI stand for? CRI-O? Container runtime or something?
It is indeed runtime, specifically for Kubernetes. So Kubernetes basically is like, you could say that's more for container clusters orchestration. And it has to execute the actual work. It has to communicate with the runtimes. And when it started, the Docker was the standard one. They got away from that because Docker became like more cumbersome. And they had an interface that's a common, I think, common runtime interface or container runtime interface, if I'm not mistaken, and creates an implementation of that as a basically lean runtime manager, but integrates with lower runtimes like the OCI jail, for example, from Doug, and also the RunJ from Samuel.
Cool.
And Doug actually is being busy adding that support there. It didn't officially land yet, but he's busy with it.
Yes. Cool. That is great news. Any questions for Noor? And as mentioned, is awesome. Well, thank you for that update. And have the calls resumed that Doug was managing? Or
yes. Yeah. Yes.
Oh.
Yeah. So yeah, I didn't have a chance to say that last time. Yes, it did. But I think after the finalization of the specs, I think that these calls will end, and possibly maybe make the FreeBSD jails as the main call if possible, or make other set of calls. We'll see about that. Of course, we will align with the group here as well.
Cool. Love it. As a naive outsider, I'd spell out CRI-O unless it purely doesn't stand for anything, but I'm trying to identify that. Spell that out right up front, if you could.
So, sorry, what's the question? I,
It's a suggestion. CRI-O is spelled out as only letters so far, unless I'm completely blind. Uh, Container Runtime Initiative, perhaps O. So if this acronym means something, I someone
uh,
spell it out at the top of this. So read me.
no, I'm not. I hear everybody in calls and talks and everything. They call it CRI-O, so our
CRI-O.
CRI-O.
Oh,
Yeah.
sorry, CRI-O. Hopefully it means something cool. I will make a small note. I'm just me, naive guy off the street. What does CRI-O
It's actually an interesting question. We'll look it up.
stand for? Cool. Also, any questions for Noor? And I might have it in another tab. There are immunes changes landing. Carlo, can you give an update to those? And I'll try to find a link while you do that, unless you've got it.
Okay. If it's okay, I would share my screen
Oh,
just to show a little demo.
absolutely. Oh, please, please feel
Let's see
free.
if VirtualBox will play along. Uh, and can you see my virtual machine?
Loading.
Yeah,
Yes.
slowly loading.
XFCE with a
Yes,
neat diagram.
nice.
Yes. Rock and
Okay, so
roll.
changing window managers did the trick. Okay, before in Immunes, you could create a topology and then run it and get a shell on some routers and PCs and whatever. And if you wanted to modify something, you had to go to experiment, terminate it, modify something, and then restart everything. So it would tear down all the jails and then recreate them. And now in the version 3, that's the beta, it is possible to modify the topology while it's running. So on router 2, I opened up a shell and I will ping the address of router 1. And when I connect them, it should start pinging. And I can also, for example, add new routers, connect them, and stuff like that.
That's
Yeah, so that's
ridiculous.
the that's the major new feature.
That's
So
huge.
yeah.
Are we allowed to say curse words in the call? Like
Sorry?
damn, like
As long as they're non-English, that's kind of probably a good policy.
really.
Nice work.
That is very cool.
Yeah.
Actually live.
Brinischigi. But that was a good word. Okay, that is fantastic. Continue with your praise. What is the supervisor making all that happen? What magic? Is it indeed a true process supervisor?
For this thing to work.
Yeah.
It was mostly like some logic, because you don't really need to tear down jails to add new jails and stuff like that. So it was just changing how the code worked, and it's it didn't need any modification on the FreeBSD side. It's just running up, spinning up new jails and stuff like that. Just some
Oh,
additional logic in the GUI, in the user interface, and yeah, the next future progression is to separate the graphical side from what's running the experiment. So to make it easier to separate into for example, a web interface and not only like this is a TCL, a TCL client. So that's like the next big thing Dennis is working on. But
Can
yeah,
it
sorry.
run the jail and route and netgraph and whatever commands via SSH, or do you have to run the graphical front end on the jail host?
Right now, you need to run it on the host, and that is what we are trying to move to. So you can attach to a remote experiment and see stuff there and modify stuff and stuff like that. But you also do not need to run the graphical interface to actually execute stuff. So, for example, I will open some topology and I can do something like this. I can run this in like a batch mode. So I just started the topology and it's running. If I do JLS, you can see everything here. Or oh, I don't have JQ installed. Give me a second. But yeah, and if you have graphical interface, you can also attach to it while it's running. But that's you could do that before. So attach to experiment, and you can attach to it and see everything that's running. Yeah.
Wow.
So let's see. I need to hide IPv6 addresses because oh, they're not. It's just a little bit tiny, so it's I cannot read stuff. So let's, for example, attach to this machine. So yeah, this is like just a shell there. But yeah, uh, that's the that's the update. Doesn't seem like a lot, but it was really a lot of work from Dennis. If you go like on GitHub and see, it's like through, I don't know, like 10 commits, but it's plus 30,000 lines and minus 30,000 lines or something like that. So yeah.
Is
It's
it
pretty
okay to
cool.
show that image you've got on screen with the
Sorry?
V6 address? Is it okay if I put a screenshot of that image in
Yeah,
the
yeah.
minutes? Okay, cool. You mentioned V6 addresses. Cool.
This is this repository, IMUNES examples. It's also public on GitHub. They use it in University of Zagreb for teaching. There are some interesting topologies where you have like DNS, mail, and stuff like that, and you can just right-click Wireshark and see what's happening. So students use it to inspect packets and write some, I don't know, homework. Yeah, you can get.
Have either of you considered a talk proposal on this subject to any conferences coming up?
Yeah, Dennis will apply for the next EuroBSDCon talk. It's gonna be in Zagreb, so it's
Yeah,
not
naturally.
far for him. Yeah.
I hear there's one in Canada coming up with a CFP that closes in 2 days, or tomorrow even. By
I don't
Dennis.
know. I can tell him. I'm not sure if he's
Cool.
planning on traveling. That's like half the world away,
This is
and
true. This is true.
this is his hometown, basically.
Of course, of course.
Yeah.
Is there anything preventing this from being used in production? If it's
Mm,
managing these various systems and beautifully graphing them and doing all the things?
I mean, not really, except if you don't really trust UnionFS. It's using UnionFS to create file systems for these nodes. So it's using like the base file system, and then for each of these nodes, it's adding a layer for them. So they have their own like temporary file system. And when you like stop a node, it just deletes it, the jail and then the file system. So
Okay,
yeah.
cool.
So if you don't really trust UnionFS and the manual page itself says it's buggy and full of bugs, and you can, you know, search on the Bugzilla, there are a ton of bugs for UnionFS. But if you are fine with that, you can really use it for anything.
Well, is the lower level read only? I believe that's the challenge.
Yeah,
You get that if that becomes read write, bad things happen.
it is mounted as a nullfs read-only for each of these nodes, and then, well, I can actually open up the mount
Oh, sure,
command
totally.
here.
Yeah,
Yeah, and we can just see.
that's awesome.
Maybe I will start like a smaller topology, so it's not like this whole mess. Let's
Beautiful.
start a new topology and like one PC, and I can see. So this is a ZFS file system, but for this I only have so it is nullfs mount for this node. So this is the experiment ID, and this is the node index. And above that, it is just UnionFS and then DevFS.
Jan, is there anything fundamentally precluding your innovative data set layout from working with this?
Nothing
Nothing,
other than we
exactly.
not having published it.
Well, oh, well, there's that issue. Cool. If it's down to that, that simplifies things. So, Carlo, Jan, if you've been following along, has been over the years has been working on a rather innovative set of clones and snapshots and goodies that could greatly speed this and possibly drop in if it's all cleanly implemented at both ends. So this is fantastic. I love it.
Yep.
If that were to be, that graphical planning and deployment tool that many of us have envisioned for decades, maybe this is it. That is cool. I love it.
Yeah.
I love it.
Nice.
Any questions for Carlo? Anything else to demonstrate?
Not really. There are some minor changes, like it's some configs are separated and stuff like that, but it's nothing flashy like a live
Oh,
execution.
no kidding. Yeah, that is stunning. Well, I think you've just
Yeah.
won the call.
If I
Okay.
remember correctly, there was also a patch to finally make unlinking on nested nullfs evict the cache entries, so that apparently the core issue was sometimes with nullfs it wouldn't release files until you unmount it, is that if you had nested nullfs, it would not evict the only it would only evict the vnode cache on the topmost nullfs, and then the lower ones would not get evicted and would thereby hold on to references to unlinked files. But I can't find the commit right now.
No, I'm not aware of that.
Well, very.
Jan, was there any progress on the jails managing to escape via sharing like a directory handle to each other?
I haven't seen anything.
Oh.
Maybe we should discuss active security problems after the recording stop.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, thank you for the definitions of CRI-O. Maybe drop those in the README. I've got a screenshot of the basic image there. That is fantastic work. And looking at the repo, Dennis has indeed been busy. Let's see if it'll let me change tabs, maybe. And there we go. Is that the Dennis you're referring to?
Yeah.
Plus 56,000 minus. Yeah, he's been busy. That's cool. Over time, of course, but yeah.
And the second one is 30,000 lines, just the import for the original project, which is from the early 2000s.
Got it. Very cool. My scrolling is clumsy. Well, that is impressive. And if you haven't done so, perhaps just a video demo would be good just to get the word out, because to see it live is impressive insofar as we've all doodled with topologies, be it on a post-it note or otherwise, and we've all attempted to push that into production, but the fact that you've linked those up and made them live is stunning, in my opinion. Other topics. Daniel, you've been jailing all the things.
Yeah, nothing specifically jelly really on my end. I'm just doing more salt provisioning. So
Oh,
for
interesting. What brought you to Salt? That's a name that doesn't come up as often as, say, other competing exciting ones.
Well, so I was working with Clara back in 2020, I think, and one of their guys there, uh, it was his thing. So they don't use it for scale engine or anything, but one of the Clara guys recommended it, and it's pretty Python-y and stuff, and it has kind of an interesting approach to configuration management. Like the way the files are described, it says, the desired state to put the thing in, like a package is installed. And it checks to see if the package is installed and then installs it. So you can get some pretty fancy recipes. I just got one working. The slightly jail related because I have some WireGuard jails, and it programs, and so you can add a rule to the salt recipe. So 3 lines, private key, and the network mask, and tell it to run the salt recipe, and then it installs that key on my entire fleet. So you can get to any of my different data centers with that particular WireGuard key. And it does a nice job of doing that. It does make me terrified. So I use Git and an approval process to get things published into it. Yeah. So anyway, it's been pretty useful, but like I said, nothing really too jail specific in there, except that it is aware of whether a machine is a jail or a host, and you can fine tune your configurations with it like that. Now, I have no idea if I even need this, or everybody uses Ansible, if I could just use Ansible and never use Salt, or I don't know, Puppet Chef or any of the other orchestration management tools. But this is the one that I fell upon, and it seems to be doing okay. Is all I can say about it. And yeah. So, and I will say that about 50% of the time, I'm really just using it to run a script that I wrote.
I was wondering about
bunch
that.
of machines. Yeah.
Would it ever be good to have a special call on just the state of, say, the BSDs and Illumos in those ecosystems, be it Ansible, Chef, Puppet, you name it? Are they indeed first-class citizens, or held back in any way?
It's close to that for Ansible, but there are a lot of low-hanging fruit where it wouldn't be much code to add FreeBSD specific Ansible modules to let's say FreeBSD Ansible community repository and to collect them to vastly improve the runtime of common playbooks. Because the problem is that, of course, you can do everything with Ansible on FreeBSD, but a lot of times you have to do it very imperative, step by step, by running like the command module and then dispatching on the standard out or error or exit code. And that means that you're running very tiny steps, which means you're running a lot of them, which means your whole playbook runs forever, or it feels like that after the second time. So yeah, we need higher level modules to amortize the overhead of Ansible being slow as molasses in February.
I will say that Salt has been pretty solid. The issues that I've had in the last 4 or 5 years have to do, I think, with I mean, maybe or maybe not, with the maintainer. So like sometimes actually, maybe I should rephrase that because that sounded like I'm picking on somebody, but there's, I don't know, like sometimes there's a version that comes out and it doesn't have a dependency that's obvious, or a dependency that's at least extremely common, or maybe if there's a reason that dependency isn't there, maybe there should be flavors or something like that. But like, I don't know, I did an update of my development network, and Salt said, oh, Pi 311 cryptography isn't installed. Well, I can't do a whole lot with a key exchanging based orchestration system without the cryptography module. So So I think I don't know. Maybe what I'm saying is maybe if people like certain orchestration systems, they should probably assist with the maintenance of them because there have been a couple little glitches like that, and maybe there's a good reason for them, but I have the most boneheaded basic salt setup in the world, and when things break, it's like, well, that's interesting. Um, yeah, what are I will say that jails are first class, and FreeBSD and jails are first class citizen in Salt for the most part, at least up until today, from 2020 till today. Now, I don't know, are Ansible, I think, is very FreeBSD-ish, or any of the other orchestration systems very FreeBSD-ish, or
Apparently
first class.
cdist, if I'm not mistaken. Let me try to find the link to that. I think Antonig was advocating for that. cdist. So anyway, any salt questions for Daniel? cdist, Wikipedia. Oh, better than nothing.
Yeah, I have Ansible questions because I will say that when Clara told me to start using Salt, they said, "Oh, well, also use Ansible for provisioning," and I'm like, "Well, why do I need both?" So I guess that's one question I have.
Jan, I recall you slinging some Ansible in your time.
Yes,
How specific are
I'm
those
using
questions,
it
Daniel?
in Anger. And yeah, so yeah, shoot, what's your question, Daniel? Do you have any
Exactly it.
Well,
question?
I guess so I remember I remember talking to the Clara folks about this, and I don't think I ever got a complete answer. But why would I want multiple orchestration systems? Like, what is Ansible's specialty? So Salt, I think, is its specialty is configuration maintenance. So it's going
Mhm.
to go in and turn the knobs when necessary on a 30-minute schedule or something like that. So what is Ansible's what is that great for, especially for jail management?
So what Ansible is great at is the ease of onboarding systems, because all you need is basically a Python interpreter, and you can even bootstrap that with a command module which runs without a Python interpreter. So it piggybacks on SSH if used in the default push mode. So basically, you can use Ansible to install Python, and once you have Python, you can run Ansible. Because of that, you don't have to install an agent. You just need an SSH login and yeah, Python interpreter, which is from, let's say, this millennium.
Sounds out
I think they've that's the nice thing, and then you could come up with a neat little definition like, oh, it's just a concatenation of idempotent functions, which is just a way to be a jerk, because you either know what it is, or it doesn't mean anything to you to have it described like that. So what Ansible playbooks are supposed to be is basically you have a lot of little tasks, and each task describes part of the system state as it should be, and then you run them, and in sequence we will set up your system correctly. That's the idea. And so it's very easy to get up and running with it. The downside of Ansible is that it slows down as you add more tasks to your playbooks and becomes slower and slower to run. So if you have to make up for missing modules by doing things as you would in a shell script, so you turn Ansible to a slow shell for YAML, basically. Yeah, it is what it is, but you have a lot of built-in modules, so they have this battery included approach.
Right. So sounds like they're extremely similar, and except that
And the
Ansible is
difference
much better provisioning.
between SaltStack and Ansible is that Ansible doesn't really have an agent. So
Ah,
you
okay.
either use it in push mode, where from the system where you're logged in, you run Ansible, it SSHs into the target system, and then runs the tasks on the target system. Or you run it in something called pull mode, where you have a supported version control system. These days, that normally means Git, but others are also supported. And then you pull a certain branch or tag or whatever out of your repository. And if the repository updated, then you run some playbook stored in the repository. And that you can put on a 30-minute cron job from your example. And yeah, it would be a poor man's agent, but you can also have some kind of orchestrator trigger that.
Got it.
And
Yeah, they're
then
very,
you can
very,
have
very
a
similar.
reporting callback to ship the results to some centralized dashboard or whatever. So you can make it work as if there's an agent, but it's not the normal way to do it.
Yeah, yeah.
So
So I
the
do.
biggest advantage of Ansible is just it's easy to get started.
Right. So yeah, maybe just solving that problem, since I'm using the sort of management agent approach for a lot of what I do, and maybe just
And
figuring out what the salt answer to that problem is, because that really does sound lovely. Because I had, call an internal link pipe into sh bootstrapper, and I'm thinking that is annoying to manage. That is
some
very annoying to manage.
some experienced SaltStack users who want to put Ansible down sometimes say, yeah, I have an Ansible GitHub repository or something to just bootstrap SaltStack.
Right.
Because
Yeah,
you
no,
can't do that. Just
doing exactly. Yeah, I think Clara is doing
Ansible
exactly that.
pointed at but on the other hand, you can do the same, kind of put a dot file in there to configure your SaltStack minion.
Mhm. All right.
Yeah.
Well, I guess I'm not in a terrible position, but yeah, but it is interesting to see what the grass is greener on the other side.
I'm just tempted to always remind SaltStack developers of RSA with an exponent of 1.
Mhm. Right.
Which they did in the early days, which of course is no-op and completely broken.
Any other system configuration management stories to share, or will we all be using IMUNES by the end of the year? Ba-dum-bum. Anything else at this time?
Some people are still stuck on Puppet or Chef.
Yeah,
There
Scale
may
Engine was
even be
still
the
on
odd
the
CF
Puppet.
engine managed system around if you want to dig up corpses or whatever.
Puppet was an absolute local darling back in the day, but I suppose times have changed. I think they sold out to someone, and I don't know who the current owner is. Do you maybe? Puppet. Who else am I forgetting?
It's also a question of language ecosystem. If you're in the
Right.
Ruby ecosystem, then something written in Ruby may be more attractive. These days, for basically all the system administration tasks, you can find Python modules. So
Yep.
despite any advantages or disadvantages, it's reasonable to start just writing stuff in Python because you can find Python bindings for all the stuff you want to do. And the downside of that is that, especially when you do it like Ansible, where by default, every task invocation spawns a new Python interpreter from scratch and then loads in all the runtime, then it becomes slow.
Anything else at this time? We are 44 minutes into the hour. Let's go there. Sure. Alexander, do you want the floor to discuss Section 4 synopses? Is that broadly across all manuals or one specific page?
Can you hear me?
Quietly, yes.
How about now?
Sure. What you got?
So let me share my screen.
Sure. I'll try to stop.
So
What?
how do I screen? Oh, there it is. Okay. So we're working on a new man page. Can you guys see?
There is mostly Zoom with a little floating gray bar. There we go. Yes, that loaded. It took time.
Okay, so we're working on a new man page for MTW. I've previously said in one of our calls about I really love the style used in VT. So for Wi-Fi drivers, it's been diverging further and further since DevMatch loads things automatically, and then we were recommending in Loader, but then it started being that we wanted to do in rc.conf. So Carlavia said I could do this today, but I haven't pushed it to main yet because we're still, the FW get support is still being reviewed. But this is what I'm working on. So this is like bringing it more in line, I think, with what synopsis is in section 1 and section 8, where the synopsis doesn't tell you, it doesn't describe it. The description is in the description section. But if you understand that, then it's just all the stuff that you would need to review if it's like, oh, what was that syntax again? So here's what we've cooked up for this. I think this is the first module where we're going to do it like this, but I'd eventually like to do them all like this if everyone thinks it's fine. So at the top is what you need to put it in your kernel, and then if you want to explicitly enable it is the middle, and then the knobs are down. There's only one for MTW so far.
It certainly implies enabling when you say in rc.conf. Maybe use a word like enable. I don't think there would be any harm in that.
Yeah, so here's
Or be
here's
consistent. Go ahead.
here's the closest where we're doing something like that.
Well,
Here's what we've got for, and this is also not in main yet, but here's what we have for this one. But
It's a little more verbose, and I think that's helpful because the moment you see, a FreeBSD developer, of course, this is a section 4. I get it, but never make it harder. So if it is explaining device crypto, well, oh, that's a kernel configuration option. I would say spell it out in my own personal biased opinion.
Yeah.
I'm weird.
And it's useful to say
at present,
either compile it in or load these modules. And I don't know if it's a good idea to say in loader.conf, because the problem is we have a third way. Basically, you can either put it in your static kernel configuration to compile it into the kernel itself, or you can load it as a module from loader.conf. And if you can get to that point without having that module, let's say, for example, for a GPU driver, then you can also load it from rc.conf. And yeah, the syntax is different. So like pick one of these three.
yeah, I think that I don't know about this specific one about the crypto accelerator, but I think that this was from before we started recommending doing everything, because before we would say, okay, always put it in loader.conf if you can because it's faster, but then Des told me last year that they've worked on it and it's not faster, and now you shouldn't do that unless you need it for boot.
Loader.conf was always slower because the bootloader uses whatever firmware you have to talk to the disk, either of historically BIOS or UEFI or something platform specific for other platforms like open firmware, and those drivers are often very slow. So loading something big like the ZFS kernel module that way can take tens or hundreds of milliseconds easily on a slow firmware system. Doesn't matter if the system is fast once it's booted. But yeah, theoretically, I think there is the advantage that all of the kernel modules loaded through loader.conf are laid out in such a way that you may get better usage out of super pages. But if this is really relevant, I can't really say. Because they are physically continuous, the early loaded kernel modules, you may get better use of that, but for modern hardware, that shouldn't really matter because it won't find any platform which heavily biases in favor of super pages.
I have yet to learn anything about super pages. So here's what we're doing in IWL Wi-Fi, and it's like that's starting to become like the template for new drivers, and I hate this. Like this is completely, to me, absolutely not what a synopsis is. All of this stuff should be in description, in my opinion. So, and that's an opinion, and I absolutely respect. You know, I want to hear everything. You know, before changing things.
In my opinion, the first on the MTW, the one you didn't like, the one part which does belong in the synopsis, I think, is the KLD list line, the indented one. But again, should it just say this KLD list? Because the way it explains this, it's one of the shortest way to get it kind of self-contained, but it's also a terrible idea to expand a variable in KLD underscore list. So this way of doing it by using KLD list equal and then a variable expansion, that's not what you're supposed to do with rc.conf if you want to make use of things like sysrc, which I would assume any new user should learn as the default and then have a very, very good reason to have this kind of real code in rc.conf. So should it just say sysrc KLD list plus equal?
I'm okay with that as well.
Because this here is not tooling friendly. It puts actual code in rc.conf and not just verbal assignment, and that breaks a whole lot of automations. Because yes, rc.conf is canonically parsed by just running it through the shell interpreter and looking at the defined variables at the end of it, but that does not mean that things like, I don't know, Ansible, SaltStack, sysrc and so on really like that or can modify it and preserve that structure. So tools may actually run it through the shell and then have the shell dump its variables to standard out or something if they want to, but what they can't do is they can't then preserve that structure for arbitrary code. Maybe someone has written code to understand this specific pattern of appending to the end of a list or something and preserve the list structure. But as soon as you start to do things like invoke eval inside of that in a loop or run setvar to change a variable instead of using the assignment operator, then all hell will break loose.
Wow,
But
I am so
just
glad that I brought
assigning
this up.
KLD underscore list to that will totally break someone's system, this guide here, because this KLD underscore list will override the existing list with just that single one. And if you have already your GPU driver, let's say, in KLD underscore list, then it will just no longer load the GPU driver. So setting just KLD inline 40, that is basically a recipe for disaster tool. So you could say sysrc and then KLD underscore list plus equal. If you want to be pedantic, there should be a quoted space between the plus equal and no, you can't use plus equal in shell. You have to prefix it with the sysrc command.
I don't know that it will. I think it's abusing CD to use. I need to be ragged.
Yes, you probably need some kind of different markup, but literal code, whatever. So the following would be, as far as I know, the way to do it. I will put it in chat.
SysRC. I got to check SysRC.
So this
syntax.
This is the
Okay,
syntax
thank you.
you're supposed to use. The space is optional-ish. It's optional as long as the separator is a space. But if you have other separators, then yeah, just to go there. That doesn't look good, right? It should be a bold.
Pardon. No
For some reason,
comment.
the space is missing or not shown. Do you have to protect that from mdoc so that it's actually rendered as a space?
Which space? Space?
Oh, there, it's not there in the input. Okay.
So it's like this then.
No, there should no after the equals sign inside the double quote or single quote. No, if you have it outside of the quoted part, then it will be eaten up by the shell interpreter and just replaced with splitting the argument list. But it should be one argument list, but with a space inside of it. Yes, this.
I remember when
But
I was using SysRC previously, I didn't need a space. And
no,
it just
you don't need it. It's not. It defaults to a space. In some cases, you need it. If you have other characters, it may misidentify as a separator already in your list. If you wanted to force it to use a space as the separator, despite, for example, the values containing commas.
I see. I think. Okay, yeah, I've got it with a space.
Space is the default separator. But maybe you want to have tabs in there or whatever, then it will use that.
So well, let's see. Of course.
I think anything which is not valid in a shell variable name or something can be a separator if it follows after the plus equals. So
Oh, nice. SysRC is smart. I said, oh, nice. SysRC is smart. It won't let me.
But
It won't let me test that.
What does it doesn't let you test it? Yep. No, it's not really smart. What it does is it's all the plus equal with an empty, and then it just said sorry that variable is unknown as a warning. So this isn't really it being smart. It's just doing the obvious thing. It's not clever in a way to understand that you probably meant to have one argument instead of two. And I would argue that using single ticks would be better, but and you should probably have some kind of context in between the two blocks so that it doesn't look like one block, a new line, and then a continuation of that block, but use this command to add it to your rc.conf. But yeah, you need some kind of example text, which is idiomatic to a native speaker.
Alexander, one quick question. What was the IWL something 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 page that you were using as a perhaps not optimal example, but is being advocated by others?
Oh, I've opened this up.
IWL Wi-Fi. Thank you. That flew by too
So-
quickly. Dyslexia. I don't know. Something. Thank you.
This is like the template now. That things changed so much from, the days when we would just put how to compile it in. But I still think that how to compile it in is still relevant. If you're reading the manual, that's still relevant. How to compile it in also means how to not compile it in, and that's still relevant. And people who are reading driver manuals might need to know that, and I think that describing it should be in description.
Yeah, I guess if you want to say how to not include it, then you kind of implicitly depend on that platform's generic configuration. So is this part of generic, then you probably want to learn how to not include it so that you can load it as a module. For example, if you want to modify a driver, you probably don't want it in the kernel so that you can unload it, change it, recompile it, and load it again. But if you just want to use it because it's not, let's say it's some kind of SCSI or RAID card, and you need it to boot, then you probably want to know how to compile it in or which kernel module to load. Yeah.
Yeah, so I've got to play with it a little bit more in light of the fact that this line here, Jan pointed out, is actually no good, breaks tooling. So I'll play with that a little bit more, but I'm really trying to get to where a synopsis is, is like actually a synopsis. In section 4 is the same as, in any other section, where it's like, these are the relevant knobs. It doesn't tell you how to use the knobs. How to use the knobs is in description.
But I think it's important if you have different type of config files to have a single line over each block of lines telling you what it is. It's kernel config, it's rc-conf, change commands, it's a sysctl, it's a loader tunable, whatever. I want to know which file it goes into, basically, and implicitly thereby which syntax it is.
Okay, we have this in VT.
And we have it for all but the kernel config.
Yeah. And I think that maybe part of why we have that is because like all we have for kernel config is the variable environment variable name kernconf, which I think is fine, but maybe yeah.
We don't have a manual page to reference. Maybe the kernel configuration needs to get a man page.
Well, all that stuff is documented in build, and I think that build is a nice place for it. And so if you search the manual, sorry.
So it's all in build 7?
Yeah, that's all in build 7. And I've got also, hopefully this is the one.
Nope, it is not, because the meaning of things like device is not explained, and the keyword device doesn't even appear in the build 7 man page. And there's something special about device versus option. I don't know enough to define it, but I know that there's a difference between option and device. And sometimes it matters.
I think that also part of why that's not documented is because sometimes it's bullshit. Like sometimes options, sometimes devices are named option, and sometimes devices are like things that are not devices at all.
Do we have any situation where both a device and an options exists with the same name, so that we have to treat them different? So what's the difference between options and device?
I have so far been unable to figure that out.
Do you know in which file the parsing code for the kernel configuration lives?
Nope. I've also got a review open for this. We kind of gutted all this stuff out of here some years ago and put it in updating, but then some of it is still in development, and I was working on it in development, and I don't like that. I think the examples for building the system should be in the examples of the build manual page. So I've copied those over to here and given them some section titles, and also put some of the information from, you know, a little bit more of the information from updating in here. I think, yeah, I think that this stuff should be in build. Nobody has said anything. I've had the review open for maybe like a week, 2 weeks. Just crickets.
Do all these pages cross-reference build at the bottom?
They all cross-reference build, yes.
Great, excellent. Just be consistent. And my 2 cents is, do these make sense intuitively to a developer coming from another OS? Because we don't want to scare them off.
Yeah, I don't want to scare anyone off, and I want to just increase consistency. So
Amen.
here, this device, no device, I'm not really sure that it's appropriate for examples to be where the thing is documented. I think it should be in the description, but here's what we've got so far.
A quick question. Which page is this, and why is it suggesting a J8 that is absolutely arbitrary per system?
It's been doing that. This is build 7. This is a draft from there, and I I didn't want to attack that. I use J30 on my laptop. I think that
maybe we should use just $N CPU.
Right. Or yeah, can you use dollar or do you have to do a backtick or something? But either way, specifying a very specific developer's hardware core count is probably not helpful, especially for those who might have 64 cores to play with and think that you have to have J8 for reasons.
no, I agree. That's stupid. The recommendation has been 1.5 times your CPU, but for a long time. But I've never done it that way. And I put it this way because it was like this before, and you kind of have to pick your battles in reviews.
So historically, the guides I've heard is CPU count plus 1.5, or 2 times, and just from just oral traditions. But the problem is that beyond, let's say, n equals 32, you run out of exploitable concurrency in the make files.
Correct, but J8
so
is
if you
going
have
to harm
something
some
like
people and it's going
make
to benefit others.
256 or something, because you have 128 cores plus hyperthreading on your nice little Epic box, which these days you can squish down into 1 or 2 U if you are too
correct
sound dampening walls away from them.
Right. Well, point being, J8 will hurt some people and hurt others for different reasons. So it's bizarre we have that suggestion. Some may not have 8 to work with. Some people may have countless cores and their boss is pissed off. Why is the build taking so long? Because they didn't know that they thought that you had to do it. So that's my one point.
No disagreement there. I wouldn't mind just flat out removing the J's from there, but they've been there. And I think that previously they were in the development manual, and I don't like that. I think that the development. So if we go to the unmodified development, right? It says up in description that somewhere in here where it says, yeah, build instructions can be found in build and release. Okay, that's sensible. But then we had these examples that I copied over and cleaned them up a little bit and put them in build. It's like they were supposed to be in build. The description says it was in build, and then we gutted build. Here's the build that's actually in kernel, or not in kernel, in current. And this just says that, hey, we gutted them and put them in updating, but then there is still one here for some crazy reason. And I've been mad about this for years. Examples for building the system should be in build. They shouldn't be in development, especially since development says to go get them from build.
Okay, we won't solve all those issues today, but as long as we've all got our 2 cents slipped in, and I'm so grateful that you are pursuing this and with a great attitude. Let us know how we can help you as a group. I'll leave it at that.
Thanks. You guys helped a lot just today. I had no idea. I'm sure that whoever wrote this KLD list script expansion in IWL Wi-Fi also had no idea that breaks tooling. So I'm very glad that I brought this up, because now I have to go back to the drawing board a little bit. But that's great. We're going to have a better finished product.
Then I would assume that who did that doesn't not know, but thought that it is a useful shorthand to not run this as is, but it's valid code. It gets the idea across, and you're supposed to know that you're not supposed to put it in like that, which is really dangerous. Because a lot of experiences, yeah, I know that you can do it like that, but for a short test, if you're not using the tooling right now, and then you can clean it up. Of course, that assumes that everyone knows about these things and always thinks about them, which isn't the case. So it's a preloaded foot gun with a bullet in the chamber.
Yeah, no, we should never have any foot
But
guns loaded up. I don't want to load any foot guns for anybody.
I know,
That's
but
very
the
bad.
problem is
No, it is Unix, and they come with a
it's
territory.
Unix,
So it's like,
and
yeah, well,
the thing is, rc.conf as passed by the IRC scripts accepts this kind of code as
Yeah.
syntax.
interesting.
But because the rc.d scripts are written in our FreeBSD bin/sh shell, and they just source in the rc.conf as code into the current process. So it's code execution by design,
Interesting.
which means you can, it's just dot, it's equivalent to running dot space slash etc rc.conf. Just that it tries a few other files too. If they are readable, they get executed by just slurping them in the current shell process. That means you can modify shell variables, and that's how rc.conf scripts are configured. The thing is that this is obviously Turing complete because it's shell, and that means you can't reason about it unless you're a human developer or a general AI, to come back to the joke from earlier. But so instead, if you restrict yourself to just using it as key equals value and apply the necessary quoting to the values, then you can treat it as a not config file, and this is what tools like sysrc do. They have a few conventions built in, for example, that there are variables which describe other variables, which is where all the etc defaults rc.conf comes in, where there is a description what each variable does and so on in default values. But yeah, it's problematic to
text. Like you said about the whole in-kernel thing, it requires some boilerplate text. So I've got to come up with like what's a nice concise boilerplate text for that.
Yes, and I think it should be for each block a single line which easily fits on 80 column displays, just because it's Unix, it's traditional layout. So it should basically be in this file put, and then the file referenced as a man page and a colon, and then in some kind of semantic markup which gets presented as bold text in the HTML representation as fixed with font, the actual configuration. That's what I would like to see as a user. And consumer who reads man pages both in anger on the command line of the system, maybe just at the text console without a browser up and running if I've broken my daily driver. But also, if I'm looking stuff up, then I'm often consuming it via man.freebsd.org, and it needs to be usable on both.
Yeah, that makes sense. I'll definitely, of course, test test the HTML output as well.
And the other thing is that one of the anti-patterns I've seen in the man page you brought up as a negative example of what not to do is that the synopsis was hard to sparse on actually useful information. It was lots of prose, but little information. And it got in the way of getting to anything else because it's basically on a laptop display or in a smallish terminal window. It just blocks the whole first effective page.
Yeah, that's a huge argument that I have against why I don't want to see this kind of stuff I don't want to see prose in synopsis at all, personally. I think that's not consistent with what it is. And then that's one of my daily struggles. Like, kids post man pages contributions, and it's like, yeah, like, thank you so much for trying to work on the manual, and god damn it, we need help, but this is completely unhelpful. And how to tell them that is
yeah, that's
is very difficult without pissing them off, and they're like, fuck you, I'll take my ball and go home. And it's like, I'm sorry, buddy. I had to do that on one of them today. This guy had removed the pipe. It said special pipe file system, so you could choose either to specify it as DAO or as dev DAO, and he made it just say file system and then added 2 paragraphs to the description explaining how it can be. And I'm like, no, buddy, like, thank you so much. Like, we need help. Like, I want you to keep cooking up stuff. And I make drafts that are not viable all the time, but this not viable.
Yeah. But if you have different syntaxes or different types of configuration in the synopsis, so kernel configuration, loader conf, rcconf, I think each block of configuration deserves a single line of like half a sentence to tell you in, let's say, text block prose, just where to find the file so that I know where it goes to, that I don't have to guess which file this belongs into. I want to know, is this a rcconf or loaderconf, for example?
Yeah, and
as an experienced user,
okay
I can infer that from the syntax, that when I'm under a lot of stress, I may overlook that, and new users will definitely be confused by that. And if you put some syntax error in the beginning of your loader conf, oh boy, you've now broken the boot process and don't know how to get back to the state where you, if you're an inexperienced user, now let's say you wanted to load WireGuard, and now you have a syntax error because you used the rcconf syntax in your loader conf and put it at the top, and now it doesn't know how to load ZFS anymore. And you've effectively bricked an inexperienced user system, and all it would have taken to give them a good chance to get it right and would be to tell them this is kernelconf, this is loaderconf, this is rcconf.
Yep.
If they're reading the HTML version, it's a link. They can click on it. It will tell them the path where this file is expected to live.
Alexander, quick question on that. Because we can go to the deep, and this might not be the time for that, but is there a tradition of commenting within the manual pages, like the rationale? Because having people sort of, I don't want to say naively, go and think, oh, that must be wrong, but maybe there's some very good rationale. Is there rationale hiding in pages so that you don't get those multi-paragraph inappropriate waste of everyone's time attempts at contributing because of maybe it was just misleading or otherwise?
I think it's disingenuous to call that wasting everyone's time. I presume whoever wrote 2 paragraphs thought they were useful, and it probably was.
But if there was a rationale
their
that
understanding into writing, it's just not a good trade-off for everyone. But calling
I
it
don't mean to be
waste,
disingenuous, but the fact that if people encounter the same thing and keep responding with a fix, but the fix needs some explanation why it's not the right fix, that rationale should be hiding in there to save time, I'll put it that way.
No, I agree. And so what we've been trying to do is work on a new chapter in the man, saying how to read this manual, explaining the conventions. used in the manual.
Okay, but
Because the kid obviously he didn't understand the idea of a pipe in documentation to mean it's this or this, but at the same time, that's not proprietary to FreeBSD or even to Unix manuals. I went to a restaurant the other day and it had in the menu all of the different sauces you could order, and they were separated by a pipe.
ooh,
So
nerd,
this
I love
is
it.
a
Yes.
this is a very ubiquitous syntax,
Correct.
and it's a great one. It saves a lot of space. So yeah, we floated the idea of how to read this manual in there, and of course, I would really like to bring section 0 of the man page back, but there are technical problems why we can't do that.
Okay, so back to my first question. Do you find many comments in the manual pages with rationale or explanations or similar?
Well, ideally, I want everything to be explained in description, and like with examples, with what I had pulled up in build, there's the examples, and then before and after them, there's space for prose, explaining what's going on, and but I feel that synopsis is not the place. I'm
No,
not
what about
opposed
developer to developer, inside baseball, little things that should only be seen by mutual manual page developers and new contributors? Is there a tradition of having comments in there of such things? And I will show you an example of one that came up in my little world. And it's let's see. I'm looking at the Beehive Windows wiki page. 7Z utility doesn't have a dash in front of the flags. And someone went in and put in the dash because obviously it must be like a Unix command. And no, it's actually 7ZX, not dash X. And hidden in the syntax, it would be handy to have a little reminder that no, that's actually correct, despite the fact that it looks incorrect. So that type of tiny, trivial, little helpful stuff is what I think would be valuable to preventing a number of people looking at the exact same seemingly wrong thing that is in fact correct.
Interesting. I don't know of any examples with that.
And imagine the help that the trouble this would have saved the Debian project when there was this unallocated random memory that was used for randomization in all their cryptography, and someone proudly thought, I'll suppress this compiler warning and this other warning, and fixed it, and then created a massive headache where there really should have been a comment that said, this is intentional. This is actually it, and I can see in documentation that's just as valid a point.
I think that kind of thing is actually really difficult to pass a review. I mean, people, if I've seen a lot of screaming in reviews about people using the term patronizing.
No, it should be factual. Purely factual that the 7Z command doesn't take a flag, and there's a little for the next person to go look at that and see that and perhaps identify it as a mistake. Just have a comment hidden to the final rendered page that says, no, that is just not patronizing. Just that is the actual syntax. No, it doesn't have a dash. Exactly, in the MDoc. I'm not saying in the manual, but in the hidden for other developers.
I see. Yeah, no, there's comments supported in manuals with.
Is there a tradition of using them in FreeBSD?
Sometimes, but most of the time, it's like something very bad.
Interesting.
It's like somebody just commented out a line instead, or I've been reviewing one, and one of the other reviewers already approved it, and in the synopsis, he has a synopsis, but then he also has a comment with a completely different syntax in synopsis, and he's like, hey, dude, like, no, like, I don't know what you're doing here, but this, no.
Well, they probably shared their draft rather than their final, is what that sounds like.
Dude, somebody else already approved it. I'm like, no, don't merge this.
Oh, goodness. Oh, well, okay. Well, that's so these are all little examples, and all I can do is keep thanking you for this effort because this is important, and hopefully everyone's 2 cents have been tossed in the bucket.
Yeah, I'm really glad that I shared this with you guys.
We're
This has
glad you
given me a
brought
lot
it
of new
up because
ideas.
I've got my pet peeves. I'm sure Jan has his. You've been helping, and you've probably got your own set of pet peeves. And let's all try to move forward with them, just to constructively, non-patronizingly.
No, yeah, this is good stuff.
Uh,
That's why I tune
And
into these calls.
as someone just used to this current state of things, I'm a bit worried that useful information gets lost when bulk rewriting man pages
no
in a
question.
non-trivial way, because there's a lot of subtle things which you read it, you will overlook that, oh yeah, this shorter form is not really equivalent because I didn't know there was this corner case which justifies writing it this, let's say, redundant looking way, or but it's not actually redundant, it's just in a way so that you can find two things which are not completely identical, but yeah, I can't come up with a good example, but there's sometimes when I read a menu page, after I've understood it, I read it again and say, oh, okay, makes sense now. And when basically treating it as a refactoring job, because there's no compiler to keep you honest/correct, you can easily deduplicate things which weren't actually duplicates within a man page.
Yeah, I agree. There's a lot to consider with man pages. So I went ahead and
But
used Herald to add me as a subscriber anytime anything changes any manual pages, so that I can catch
my
more
condolences.
No, it's better than it getting messed up.
There you go.
I've been thinking very seriously about this for many years, and I talk to everyone I can about this. And so, it's much better than it getting messed up. And also, people get really touchy when they just changed it, and then, you go and change it after them. I once had some social problems because of that, and if I can catch it during review, if I can catch it during review, then it's a lot easier for me to approach it feeling gentle and for them to approach it gently. When I go through my Git log in the morning of the stuff that's changed, and somebody changed a manual and they didn't tag man pages and they did it wrong, then I'm already like guns blazing and like not really have the right attitude to approach it very gently. And then too, I have to put fixes in the commit log because otherwise it'll get lost when someone MFCs something, and that's a problem.
It's all true, all of it. I need to run. Anyway, gang, anything else at this time? Send your documentation questions to Alexander. Everyone, thank you for your help. Anything else?
No, I can
Yes, Jan.
give you an update once we stop the recording on the nullfs stuff.
Awesome. Well, who wants the author? I can't even talk. Who wants the honors?
Subscribe.
Thanks. That was beautiful. Okay, thanks everyone. Talk to you perhaps tomorrow. Have a great one. Stop in the recording.
Bye.